Well, let's begin with the topic at hand. Obviously, yesterday was a big day for you, and not only graduation, but obviously what you had spoken about on Twitter and otherwise. You waded into some territory that some people say that the police chief shouldn't necessarily wade into with your comments on making bail tougher for those who have reoffended or have been charged again. Why did you decide to wade in on that topic?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I'm always in my lane whenever I'm talking about the safety of the men and women that volunteer to put their lives in danger. So I'll kind of push back on that a little bit. All that had happened was I had obviously done my half-year assessment of the community space project that we've been doing as a result of all levels of government helping us out. Looking at that landscape, I went a little deeper to look at some of the issues and concerns to see if there are any patterns or trends. And so I took August 1st, and I picked that date because really that was at the turning point when the community really had concerns about the gun activity going on in the city. So I started August 1st, and I just rounded it off to the end of September and said, let's have a look at all of these numbers. Let's see if we see anything. And one of the things that was noticeable was that 53 people on firearms charges were given bail. And you go a step further, and 24 of them wound up getting arrested and going out on bail again. So my question was, is the community aware, and is the community happy with the way things are right now? And I think that's a fair question, because when I go into communities, I hear their pulse.
What do you make of the criticism that you received yesterday as a result of this?
I don't think it was criticism. What I think it was, there were two lanes. After I spoke, I was able to look at the interview with Mr. Lacey, and he is speaking to the court of law. I'm speaking to the court of the community. So I don't do town halls and use language like anomalies. An anomaly is a young man with a gun in his hand in the community, or has been arrested. And so, yes, everyone deserves their right to be defined on whether bail should or should not be given. And I'm not diminishing that. And in fact, in the courtroom, I highly respect that. But when my role is community safety, and when I hear loud and clear from my men and women and from the communities that speak to this, when they're saying, we're doing our part to help, we're seeing people with guns, we're seeing you arresting people with guns, and then we're seeing them back out again, then the community usually is not happy about that.
This speaks to, I think you referred to them as three buckets, the three different levels with which you have to try and combat the problem of gun violence. Review those for me, explain to me what you're talking about and how you can make sure that each of those levels is at its highest.
Okay, great. And I just want to clarify one thing about the bail issue. I'm talking about bail as it relates to firearm offenses. Right. The whole city's on fire right now because people are shooting other people in the face. And I'm saying when it comes to bail and firearms, that's a higher threshold for me. That is something that needs to be scrutinized a lot better from all lanes within the judicial system. So having said that, the three buckets, I try to keep it as simple as possible. And when I talk about gun violence, first off, gun violence, street gang violence is a social issue, full stop. The throw them in jail and never let them out again, that is not going to happen. We know that 90% of people apprehended and serving time are coming back into the community again. The social issue speaks to economics, speaks to fairness, speaks to the education, speaks to income, and a whole host of other things that various communities are at the lowest end in all of those aspects. And so when that is the social start of what's going on, and the lived experience causes young men in those neighborhoods to have to make decisions. And for some reason, the decision of actually using a gun in their process becomes a reality. That first bucket that I talk about is the at-risk. The young men and women, giving them the tools and the opportunities, having sustainable things within the communities so that there is hope. There are options, more options than picking up that gun. And so if we can reduce the numbers of those young at-risk men that don't pick up the gun, we're in a good spot. But then we've got that middle lane. That's our lane. Once you pull that trigger, you're ours. You're an enforcement person. We are going to investigate you. We are going to apprehend you, and we are going to bring you before the judiciary. That's what our role and responsibility is. But that's also reactive policing. Sure. If you shoot somebody, we're going to look for you and apprehend you.
Right, and you've spoken about the third bucket already in regards to bail. Getting
No,
back to
no, the third bucket is not in regards to bail.
Okay.
Okay. That third bucket speaks to stopping the circle, the cycle. Because what happens is, when that person, when I say 90% of them are getting released, they're going to serve their time, they're going to come out. A lot of times their only option is to go right back in, get that gun. I'm a young man, usually a young man of color. I'm not going to get a job in today's environment because jobs are hard to come across. I have no choice but to go back into that cycle. And if that young man has shot somebody, the moment he comes out, he will be shot. I've worked homicide for 8.5 years. I could go to a scene, look at a street gang member that is dead, and know who the next person is that is going to get killed. That is still happening today. Members of the community know this, law enforcement knows this, and we know this because it is happening over and over again. So breaking that cycle is what is critical. And the investment, Mark, has to be in all 3 lanes. If you do it in 2 out of the 3, you will not succeed. And the investment has to be equal.
To that point, we've taken the time this week to speak to a number of community leaders, those very people on the ground in those communities who have lived it before, trying to make a difference now. They're looking for more support, they're looking for more funding, they're looking to government for that, but they're also looking to police. What more can you do to help those people out?
Well, we're fantastic with the at-risk. We've got our focus tables. Our modernization plan speaks to working at the best of our ability, not just the enforcement piece, but the preventative piece. Our neighborhood community officers play a vital role. Our focus tables are shelling out fantastic results. And now we've got the gang exit town halls that we're having that are doing fantastic. But when you get into the high risk, and I will suggest that the high risk people are the ones that have the highest percentage of coming back and being involved in gunplay, or the ones being shot at. That high risk, we're out of that lane. We don't have that necessary legitimacy to say, I know how you've lived and what it's all about and I can help you. The high risk requires totally different tools in the box versus at risk. And a lot of times people morph them into one. You can't do that. You're not going to be successful, which is why I've made it 3 distinct separate buckets.
When we talk about a topic at hand right now within the political circles is a handgun ban, whether it be national, which some people have suggested. One of the party leaders has come out and said we'll allow cities to do that themselves. Is something along those lines perhaps part of the solution?
Well, there are 2 streams to that. The first stream is if you remove a gun off the street, it could potentially save lives. So when I did the gun buyback program and people said, oh, it doesn't work. Well, you know, we got over 900 handguns, over 2,300 long rifles. There's a lot to be said about that. So the removal and not having people have access to it is one argument, but then the other argument to it is, you know, me working as a homicide guy, and I did it for a long time, I don't recall where the ban would have had any weight to those investigations, because the criminal element will get those firearms. Our angle, we work with the different agencies internationally, so across the border, as well as collectively, provincially, federally, and municipally. We work hand in hand at learning how guns are coming across, because the criminal element is pretty sophisticated, although you need low levels of sophistication to get firearms across the border. But working with the CBSA, we have a much stronger, robust relationship with them, and so that's how the 2 lanes have that discussion, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and that's something that has also been brought up within the political circles and this election campaign is tighter border security, more powers perhaps for the RCMP to do their job and help you out as well. What do you make of some of those other possibilities, and do we need that?
Well, I'm speaking to community safety. The platforms I'm not really interested in. Community safety, whether there's an election or not, everybody has an interest in what we need to do to help reduce the guns from coming across the country. Our crime gun stats right now, 83% are coming from the United States and 17 are domestic. So there is a grave concern with what the numbers are, and so we're taking all of the investigative angles necessary in order for us to get it right.
Gun violence is probably the #1 issue, but there are other things at play in this city. You've been given a contract extension to this point. So what are your priorities? What's your focus until the end of 2020?
Well, I mean, I've got a few things that I want to close the loop on. When I had the opportunity of being a co-chair with Andy Pringle on the modernization way forward plan and with the transformational task force, there are some things that I'm looking at closing the loop to, or at least furthering, advancing our organization. And so I'm hopefully looking at the opportunities of the body-worn cameras as one of them, and seeing if we can have a deployment that is beneficial to the organization as a whole, so we can have proper deployment in the right places at the right time. So we're in the middle of a few things which are key and critical right now, and I've got a couple of things that I'll keep to myself that I want to close the loop on as well.
Perfect. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.